Okay, so good day to all of you and greetings from Finland, which will be the location for the World BioEconomy Forum 2022. More precisely, we will have the annual conference in Ruka in northeast Finland, just next to Russian border. My name is Jukka Kantola. I'm the founder of the World BioEconomy Forum. I'm so delighted to welcome you all to the third World BioEconomy Roundtable of the season 2022. We are so pleased to have you with us today. So please, you are warmly welcome. Looks like that today we are having a participants from almost 30 different countries, again representing basically all continents. We feel so honored to have you with us today. Today looks like the biggest group of visitors are coming from Brazil, so bem-vindo to all of you. Great to see you. We have again here the familiar setup for this roundtable, meaning I'm your host together with my colleague Mark Rushton, who is located in UK. And just for a sake, for a town check, okay, Mark, can you hear us all well in your end?
I can hear you very well indeed, Jukka, and great to see you, and hi to everybody attending the event today. And things are good. The UK, the sun is shining, it's beautiful, and the world seems to be getting a little bit back to normal, maybe getting away from COVID a little bit and back to the real problems of the planet. So it's great to be here. And Jukka, it was good to see you in person last week, so we're actually traveling around a bit.
Likewise.
So that was all good. So Jukka, there's been a lot happening in the World BioEconomy Forum. Can you explain a few things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, as you might remember, our latest roundtable was held on 7th of April, and it was on that time about the bioeconomy, people, planet, policies. What the fantastic panelists we have there, and it was all moderated by the Dr. Christian Waterman, which is known as an icon within the circular bioeconomy. As we learned in that roundtable, there's a lot of cooking up when it comes to biostrategies, and we do see more implementations of them. There are already almost 60 national biostrategies which has been announced. Okay, these roundtables are recorded, and I think it was quite viral. So you can still see the very latest roundtable within our YouTube channel, and there was almost 9,000 viewers for it. Also, this roundtable will be then recorded, so you could then check this also later on from our YouTube channel. War is still on in Ukraine, and the nightmare carries for the Ukrainians. We really hope that they will find a way back into peace. This humanitarian catastrophe since February 24th has been now lasted almost 4 months. Long 111 days of suffer for Ukrainians. This all will have implications also for the bioeconomy. But let's get back to the forum. The preparation for the annual forum 2022 are progressing well. As spoken in other occasions, we are expecting over 50 top level and topical speakers. And by today, over 80% of them has already confirmed their participation, and what best, they will be in person in Ruka. So you are also very welcome to visit us in Ruka. We have a very diversified group of speakers from Australia, from Japan, from Europe, Africa, US, all in all from over 20 different countries. There are several highlights within the program. Maybe I can mention one. It will be very first time that we will hear notion of the power economy powers like US, China, Japan in the same panel. All them are having very actual programs in this field. China just announced their biostrategy 10th of May. And US is debating in their Congress to make an update to their biostrategy. And also, okay, Japan is having a very fresh biostrategy, but they are very seldom telling that in public. You know, these all will be in the same panel. It goes without saying that, okay, while we are having this forum in Finland, we will also hear the very latest notion of the Finnish biostrategy, which was published in the beginning of April. And also, I would like to mention this session 4, which is focusing on looking to the future. It will be very particular this year as we are digging in more into the interconnection between the bioeconomy, bioproducts in related to climate change mitigation. For time being, the substitution effects of the bioproducts have not been incorporated in the climate change mitigation toolbox, at least in terms of a regulated compliance market or in terms of the voluntary carbon markets. You know, within the forum, we have ambitions that one day the bioproducts should be then incorporated as an additional tool for the climate change mitigation. So all in all, it's very exciting program we are having in this annual forum, and preparations are progressing well. But that's not all. So maybe Mark, you can tell something about our other activities.
Yeah, sure. There's been a lot going on behind the scenes at the World BioEconomy Forum, as always. There was a fantastic exhibition and conference last week in Helsinki, and it seemed to break the ground. It was nice to see so many people from the bioeconomy, people that we know very well and familiar faces. And it was actually the perfect place to launch the new digital platform that we have called worldbiorefineries.com. And basically this is an interactive map that you can go on and you can have a look at all the biorefinery sites going on in Europe. The plan is eventually to spread it around the globe, but you can go in and identify, where bioproducts are being made, what those bioproducts are, and it's a living thing. So we're growing it all the time. It's very good. So you can go onto the website and have a look at that. The other thing that's really progressing nicely is our World BioEconomy Circle. This is where we have prominent members of the bioeconomy who come in and give us really good drill down deeply into bioeconomy issues. Another one that is great for our followers to join. We have the Professor Matthias who runs that in our team. Again, you can find everything you need to know on the website. And another exciting thing that we have going on is the World Bioproduct Day, which is a fantastic thing. We launched it last year, and basically it means that you identify your favorite bioproduct, you take a photo or a video of it, you stick it up on Twitter or social media, and then it gets to be judged at the end, and the people there will be interviewed about why they love bioproducts so much. So we got some exciting things going on, and of course we have our news app. It's the only circular bioeconomy news app in the world, and you can find out everything that's going on in there. So again, you can visit our website. So yes, Jukka, lots going on. So let's hear what we're going to have today.
Yeah. Let's get back to business. So as heard this roundtable today, we are focusing on the theme of the corporate leaders, and today more specifically about what the forest industry leaders do think about the bioeconomy and their notion about implications of climate change mitigation. So I look forward to hearing their presentation and their story and the panel discussion later on today. Just the ones that who are participating to this roundtable for the very first time. So I would like to remind that all our activities are arranged according to 4-pillar structure. So the first pillar is about the bioeconomy policies, where we are typically then inviting politicians and regulators to share their story. What's their activity related to bioeconomy? And the second pillar, as we are today, is named as a corporate leaders and the financial world. And then third pillar, as we are then naming it, is that is that the bioproducts around us. There we are making the showcases. So what kind of products and services does the bioeconomy provide? And finally, look into the future, which is namely then the thematic area for this specific year, as it is for this year, the World BioEconomy Forum talks on climate. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to use also this opportunity to thank our partners for this roundtable. I would like to thank the Confederation of the European Paper Industry, Cepi, Brazilian Tree Industry, IBA, Forest Product Association of Canada, FPAC, Manufacturers Association of South Africa, PAMSA. Without your support, we wouldn't have able to organize the event as such as we are having today. So with these words, okay, Mark, maybe you could then introduce how do we run today's roundtable, please.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, onwards and upwards, and without any further ado, let's get into it. We have an excellent roundtable lined up for you today, and we are delighted to have a rich and varied panel made up of experts operating in the bioeconomy across the globe. You will already know that by the names that we have with us today. We'd like to make this event as interactive as possible, as always. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat box. You click on it and it's really easy. You just put any questions that you want into that panel there. We'll pick them up and then we'll put them to the panelists later on. If you could just say who you are and where you're from, that would be great. Thank you. So now let's introduce Teresa Pressas, who will be introducing all the panelists and moderating this high-level discussion. A quick bio of Teresa. She doesn't really need an introduction. She's really hugely well known. She's known in the bioeconomy throughout Europe and indeed throughout the world. And she was the Director General of Cepi, the Confederation of European Paper Industries, for a while. And she now consults and does a lot of things in the bioeconomy. And we are great and really pleased to have Teresa on board at the forum with us. So Teresa, great to have you with us. Welcome. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that very nice introduction.
That's a pleasure. I will leave it in your hands now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome to all of you, those our guests in the panel, as well as all those attending this roundtable. As Mark was saying, this is, although the different companies and entities that are with us, although they are international, their roots are in different continents. So this is a real group of global leaders. Thank you very much, all of you, for being present. Now, I think we will start, and we will start, as Jukka said, we will have 4 interventions, not very long, so we can have a real discussion among us, among the panel, but also with the audience. So without further ado, I will ask Ilkka Hämälä. He is the president and CEO of Metsä Group, where he has worked since 1988, and he is presently chairman of Cepi, the Confederation of European Paper Industries. So from the different continents, we start, and you will not be surprised, with Europe. Ilkka, very, very welcome. I'll give you now the word to you.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, participating in this panel. So, Metsä Group, a few words about what we are. So, Metsä Group is a forest company whose mother company is cooperative. So, can I have a next slide? So, we have 93,000 Finnish forest owners in our cooperative, and they are owning over 50% of the Finnish forest land. And our company has different business segments starting from the forestry. So we are developing the Nordic forest practices, selling these services to our cooperative members. Then we have a mechanical woodworking industry, chemical woodworking industry, pulp, paperboard, different grades, tissue, greaseproof papers. And we are developing new products for the global demand. So this phrase there, we develop sustainable bioeconomy together, so means really so that we must recognize our stakeholders, and like mentioned, so we have a huge amount of the Nordic forest owners as our partners here, as our owners, and to be able to develop the sustainability of the forestry. So that starts from their forests. And then we are going all through the value chain with our technology partners, with our subcontractors in different stages, and to our customers. I think that the key in this development work is to be able to get the functionality what the end consumer needs with as small resource use in the value chain as possible. And I have a next one. So if you think about the general drivers for our business, I think that we all companies share the same picture globally. So we have huge possibilities in end demand of these renewable materials. The need for mitigate the climate change has created a big market pressure for us. Then there are several drivers like urbanization, growth of the global population, and of course still strong development of the emerging markets, developing economies. So they are creating every year tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people who are coming into this stage so that they need different products to ease and help their everyday life. And I think that at least for our company, the key is so that when we are developing new businesses, new products, so we think so that we have to be helping the everyday life of every citizen who is needing this kind of products, and to be able, like I mentioned earlier, do it as small use of resources as possible. Can I have next please? So in practice, for example, like we are producing paperboards. So the challenge is so that how can we produce paperboards with less need of material to build the paperboard products with no fossil components in it, to improve the recyclability, also in the future to solve the challenge of reusability of the packaging materials, and basically avoid the excessive use of materials. And in the same time, like in construction, so going from the fossil materials, concrete, steel in construction to wood materials, but also there because wood is a limited resource globally, and especially here in the Nordic where we are operating in the natural forests or semi-natural forest, meaning so that we must be able to solve this need of new materials with as small use of raw material as possible. So that is also the key, so that we have to be constructing so that we can make the construction cubics with as small amount of wood as possible. So, and then next please, as we have the present product lines and business areas whose products may be and seem traditional, they are renewing all the time, the efficiency of them and also the production processes is developed all the time. So there is a continuous development ongoing in present products. But now when we look at the sector, very often the focus comes so that we must have new products also. So we must bring new solutions to solve the challenges coming from the fossil economy. And that's why we are very strongly also innovating and putting these new products into the value streams that we already have in place. For example, we have been now investing in 2 startup companies who are extracting some components from wood residues and making products for chemical and industry and like medicines and so forth, nutrients. So basically getting the resource efficiency also there, because if you think about the chemical industry, quite large part of our side streams are going into energy production, and that's of course well needed, but we have a huge opportunity to getting components out from these material streams and develop new products, which are obviously very needed in the markets. One volume example that very many companies are working with nowadays are textile fibers. We also have a pilot or demo scale textile plant, new process up and running in one of our integrates. And textile textile fibers made from wood, of course, are very old invention, viscose fibers, but there is a need to develop this, to get new processes which are not environmentally harmful, which are not hazardous working environments and so forth. So basically, you have to also to reinvent old uses of wood and to look from the history. So there has been a long development, 100 years development of chemical forest industry, and you can also learn from the history, but you must take new tools to make those products like textile fibers from wood to fit the present day. Okay, next please. Our company size is about 6 billion euros revenue. We are employing about 9,500 people, mainly in production and in logistics services. We have of course a large number of people in research operations, but we are not thinking so that we can develop everything ourselves. So we very much believe in ecosystems. We believe in ecosystems in developing new things, new processes, new products, but we also believe in industrial ecosystems. So basically we have strong integrates where we want to find new processes, new products, which are then operated and run either by us ourselves or some parent or partner company. So I think that the success comes from this good networking and wide ecosystems for the whole sector. Next, please. But then when you are looking at the whole development and the sustainability, and very often, at least here in Finland, it's asked from the members of different businesses. So is the sustainability targets reality, or is it just some kind of a greenwashing? And when I'm looking our operations in this sector, I think that this is true for us and for, let's say, all of the companies here. When we are looking at the targets in our operations, majority of the targets, what we are doing is improving sustainability. So we must be looking all through the value chain to get the social sustainability, to get the economical sustainability, and to get the environmental sustainability in place. And this is ongoing work. You have to realize, look, let's say, concrete actions where you can improve your operations and to be really bringing the sustainability as a basis for all your operations. Next, please. Metsä Group has been investing quite heavily during the last 10 years. Presently, we have about close to 3 billion euros investment program ongoing, and we had a previous investment program of 2 billion euros ongoing between 2015 and 2018. So I would say that in the Northern Hemisphere, Metsä Group is the company who has been developing these processes most. And of course, that comes from our ownership base, as we are owned by Finnish forest owners. So our task is to create successful industry here up in North. And to be able to do it, so we must also modernize our industry. And when we are doing investments, so we can't, let's say, replicate what we used to have. So we must start designing and make the leap, like the Rauma sawmill, which is just under the test runs. So basically we had the old sawmilling lines, and we must go through step by step and look every phase. So how can we improve the efficiency? How can we improve the sustainability? How can we improve the operations so that it's really sustainable for next 3 or 4 decades? And this is what we are committed to do together with our partners, and to be as open to all possible development ideas as possible, to screen them, to look so that they fit to our strategy, they support the development of our group, and to support the target to be the leader, one of the leaders in the sustainability. I want all the companies in forest sector to be the leaders in sustainability. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you, Ilkka. Thank you very much. I just have a small question. I have many questions, but now one particular for you. Textile fibers, textile industry is a very different world than pulp and paper, where you have been, your company has been for all those years. And it's part of the circular economy agenda. But it's also new business models. How are you, for the industry, of course, how are you, did you have to go, you know, into very different processes or restructure your company? Not really, but also train different people. How do you go about this? Because it's also promoting textiles coming from trees,
So in our case, we have quite a good support, because in our pulp company, Metsä Fiber, we have a minority shareholder, Itochu Corporation, one of the large Japanese trading houses, who has been working with textile fibers since 170 years. So basically, we have a joint development program where we are developing the processes, we are developing the new materials, and they are taking them into textile industry. So basically, presently, when our demo plant is up and running, so we are selling the fibers through Itochu to Japanese brand producers, and you can actually at the moment buy from the Japanese net stores clothes made from our fibers. So the brand name is Kura. I don't want to advertise too much, but then I also say that the brand name of the clothing is Rerax.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we'll come back to this because people also have short memories. And although textiles have been coming from trees from the very beginning, from wood, people have short memories. But we'll come back to this. Thank you. Thank you. Let me now introduce you, Walter Schalka, from CEO of Suzano. Walter, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, hello.
Hello, Teresa.
Hello. Hello. An old friend. Walter, as I said, is CEO of Suzano, and he has been nominated as Fast Markets RISI's Latin America CEO of the Year 6 times, and was elected one of the 15 best CEOs in Brazil by Forbes in 2018. And very, very welcome. Good to see you again. Walter, can I ask you please to say a few words?
Sure. Teresa, thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. Thank you to be joined with this so selected team here in this panel. I would like to welcome everybody to discuss how we can build the future of the world. And I would like to give my greetings from Brazil to our friends all over the world. I'm going to make a short presentation to you about Suzano. In the next slide, I'm going to show you how Suzano is operating right now. If you can go to the next slide, please. Suzano is a company that is touching 2 billion people in the world every single month. We have been exporting to 86 different countries, and our products are all over the world. We have right now a capacity of 10.9 million tons of pulp. Right now, we are in a construction of another mill here in Brazil with 2.5 million extra tons. This plant is going to be commissioned in the second half of 2024. In addition to that, we are in the paper and packaging industry. We have 1.4 million tons that we are converting pulp into paper and packaging. And we are in the consumer goods only in Brazil. We have 150,000 tons. And we have been developing many other products coming from trees. We have been operating in the fluff market. We have been operating in the lignin market. And we are part of the wood spin and the spin-off. I'm going to explain later about this strategy. In the next slide, we are going to see that our purpose is to renew life inspired by trees. We are 100% based on planted forests. We have a zero deforestation policy. We are only using land that have been degraded from pasture after 1994. We are not using any specific land that have been anthropized after that. Our philosophy is we are based on renewable sources. We do have some natural forests that we are preserving. We do have 1 million hectares of natural forests that we are preserving. And we do believe that we have to plan on mosaic system in order to allow biodiversity. We set a target last year, that we are going to connect 500,000 hectares of natural forest or fragmented natural forest that we have in operations through corridors in order to allow a better biodiversity. We are in the few companies in the world, and we are very pleased to be part of this journey with other companies like Metsä and other companies that could be in the right side of the equation. We are negative in carbon. We have been roughly 15 million tons of carbon sequestration, fixing carbon net after scope 1, 2, and 3 in the last years. And we will increase. We set a target of 40 million tons of carbon sequestration in 2025. You're going to see on the next slide that we have commitments to renewing life. The first one is, as I mentioned, we are going to be in the right side of the equation to combat the climate crisis. And here, my perception is that we need to grow through not only to carbon sequestration, but to increase the regeneration of natural forests in different areas, including the Amazon here in Brazil. We believe that this is going to be part of the solution of this, something that we cannot postpone anymore. There is address the carbon sequestration or the carbon emissions that we have. I have been telling that we have a situation that we, in the morning, we have been discussing about setting targets of carbon zero. In the afternoon, we are increasing our carbon emissions. We need to address that. We had set a target that we are going to have, Teresa, 10 million tons of products coming from different sources that we are going to replace fossil materials, plastic mainly. We believe that packaging is one of them, but we are going to show other alternatives as well. As I mentioned, biodiversity is a very important thing for us. We are going to have these ecological corridors. We have been working to protect water. We have been working on generate clean energy. We are increasing more than 50% our renewable energy exports by 2030. And we have been reducing the solid waste on our operations by 70% in the next coming years. I think this is our commitments, and we are in the right direction to address all of them. In the last slide, I would like to show you something that we are doing. We believe that we can replace plastic through packaging. I think the single-use plastics is something that we need to be replaced short-term. Doesn't make any sense to the world that we have right now, that we are using plastics for single-use. Plastics are a very important issue, but it's for more durable goods. Clothing, textile market, it's a very important thing. We are partner of Spinnova right now. We are one of the shareholders of Spinnova in Finland, and we have been investing with them, and we are going to have the first operations end of this year. So less than this 6 months, we are going to have operations to produce textile market through our fiber. And we believe as well on bio-oil. We are partner, one of the shareholders of ANSI in the US and Canada, and we believe that this is going to be part of the solution for longer term. Then we are in the both sides of the equation. We are increasing our carbon sequestration through our planted trees. Just to let you know, we have right now, Teresa, more than 800,000 trees planted every single day, 800,000 trees. In addition to that, we believe that we can save natural forests, and we have been increasing the size of natural forest that we are protecting. Right now, we have 1 million hectares of that. And on top of that, we have been replacing fossil materials. I think we are on the right side of the equation, and our industry has the possibility, has the ambition to be part of the solution to the world. Thank you very much, and we are ready to discuss with this selected team of panelists how we can address some of the opportunities in the climate crisis that we have around the world.
Thank you, Walter. It is in fact hard to imagine the pace of the changes that we are facing and how each one can bring something to those challenges. You talked about regeneration. I like the word, but can we talk about rejuvenating forests? And do you think this is part of mitigation or adaptation to climate change?
Teresa, we do have in Brazil, unfortunately, illegal deforestation on the Amazon area. We need to address that. Just to let you know, 97% of the deforestation that we are facing in Brazil is illegal. And the problem is not the legislation. The problem is how we can enforce the situation in Brazil. But we do have 70 million hectares of degraded land for pasture that we are not using. My advocacy is that we can regenerate planted natural forests, not for the wood market, just natural forests on this area. And we are going to make this happen with the carbon trade regulated market. We believe that a carbon regulated market worldwide is going to be part of the solution, that we can monetize funds to be able to this major reinvestment on carbon sequestration, on carbon issue that we need to do it. We are in the edge of a carbon regulated market in Brazil, and I think would be very positive to have this market that would allow to have this cap and trade system that force new investments on carbon reduction.
Thank you, Walter. And we are going to talk about that. And I think right after. Now, I would like to introduce David Brandt. He is Chair and CEO of New Forests, and he leads the company investment programs. So we'll come back to this. David is a member of New Forests Board of Directors, and he has over 40-year experience in forest investments, forest management, science, and public policy. David, I cannot see you.
I think I'm here, Teresa.
Okay, there you are. Hello.
Hi. Okay, well, thanks, Teresa, and thanks also, Jukka and Mark, for the opportunity to be here with you today, and thanks to all of you who have tuned in. Certainly a pleasure to be on this panel with all these international forestry sector experts who are all driving change and looking for new opportunities in the forestry sector around the world. So I wanted to speak today really from the perspective of an investment management business. We have been largely operating in the Asia Pacific region. We're seeing a lot of dynamic, exciting changes in the forestry markets, both on the demand and the supply side. We're seeing carbon pricing now well entrenched in our region, and an increasing sense that forests and other types of sustainable land use are representing almost a new natural capital asset class, and that's what I'll try to talk to a bit today. But first, just to introduce our company, New Forests. It's a company I founded in 2005. We're an investment management business, which means that our clients are generally large institutional investors who are looking for exposure to a diversified portfolio of assets, and forestry is one of those. We've built the business really from scratch now to manage about $6 billion of assets across Australia, New Zealand, North America, Southeast Asia, and most recently Africa. We manage about 1.2 million hectares. We cut about 10 million cubic meters of timber each year. We operate sawmills, wood chip mills. We have value-added processing that I'll talk to, and we have a business that does an international timber trade. But we've also, alongside that, specialized in conservation finance, climate finance, and looked at positive impact investment strategies. And we launched the first eco products fund in 2008 that invested across a range of instruments such as wetlands mitigation banking, biodiversity banking, terrestrial carbon projects. In 2011, we launched the Forest Carbon Partners program in the United States, which worked with many Native American communities and other private landowners to develop climate finance for those who wanted to manage their forests for conservation. In fact, we did the first forest carbon transaction in the California market in 2014 with the Yurok tribe. And to date now, I think we've delivered over $200 million to those communities. We also undertook the first emission reduction fund forest carbon offset transaction in Australia about 5 years ago. And we've done some of the earliest transactions in the New Zealand emissions trading scheme. So we've had great experience with the regulated carbon markets. Most recently, our new Asian fund is a blended finance structure, which means we have both conventional institutional investors as well as high impact investors coming together in the vehicle, which allows us to sort of supercharge the sustainability outcomes associated with the fund investments. And we will also be entering the voluntary carbon markets with that vehicle. And most recently at the COP in Glasgow last year, we announced with the UK government, Norway and Finland that we'll be launching an African forestry impact platform, which will bring together conventional forestry investment with community forestry investment, land restoration, and ecosystem conservation work. So, we've built up a good track record. We've built up, kind of a very diversified business around both the conventional forestry, wood processing, but also the community forestry partnerships with indigenous communities and operating across multiple climate finance regimes. So from our 17 years of experience, I can certainly say that it feels like the forestry sector is having its moment. The industry is leaping forward in terms of new innovations, in terms of reinventing the nature of the forestry asset class. And in some cases, this is happening quite quickly. We tend to have three big themes that we're trying to pursue with our investment strategies. And I would say, of course, first and foremost is to deliver appropriate risk-adjusted returns to our clients. But within that, thematically, we're trying to look at how we can help drive the role of the forestry sector in the transition to a circular bioeconomy. Secondly, we're trying to drive forward the role of forestry and the wider conservation and sustainable land management as providing natural climate solutions. And lastly, trying to create shared value with the communities where we operate and rural landowners in a way that helps facilitate a productive transition to sustainable land use systems. So I'll just talk to a couple of examples of how we try to implement those themes into our investment programs. And I'll start with the circular bioeconomy. I think similar to what we've heard from Ilkka and Walter, timber, wood fiber, biomass can substitute for almost all the materials that are being made from fossil fuels, and can substantially substitute for higher emitting materials like concrete and steel. A large-scale transition to bio-based materials is going to need a considerable increase in feedstock. And my view is that a significant part of the incremental wood supply is going to have to come from intensively managed timber plantations in the Southern Hemisphere and tropics. So our Australian operation, as an example, we acquired 100,000 hectares of radiata pine plantation linked with sawmills. It was a fairly rundown operation, so we had to spend a significant amount of CapEx to bring them up to speed. And then we started to look at expansion opportunities, and we've now doubled the processing capacity from those 2 mills and have begun to add secondary value adding processing alongside the mills. In our South Australian mill, we're now building a major cross-laminated timber and glue laminated timber facility that will do secondary processing of the wood from the sawmill. At our Tasmanian sawmill, we are working with the government in terms of taking plastic waste, blending it together with the sawmill waste, and upcycling that into a composite wood plastic decking product, which is termite resistant and recyclable. So we're trying to, I think, as Ilkka said, create these processing ecosystems where you have a primary breakdown and then maybe a secondary value adding and then some use of the waste streams to create more value. And if you think about us as investors, ultimately we're trying to drive value through both the forest and the processing. Our second theme relates to sustainability and the role of forests and forestry as a natural climate solution. And there really is a systemic shift going on in the thinking by institutional investors as they seek to reposition their portfolios of investments to have low greenhouse gas emissions, ultimately decarbonizing their investments and nature positive investments. And many of our clients have looked to actively reduce greenhouse gas emissions and require reporting from all of their investment managers in terms of the net greenhouse gas position. So forestry, of course, is a carbon negative sector, which is helpful in terms of that decarbonization journey. And to a large degree, some of our clients are thinking about forestry and sustainable land use now as a natural capital asset class rather than thinking of it as forestry per se. So these new natural capital investments are including sustainable forestry, sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, community-based forestry enterprises, climate finance and conservation finance, all knitted together into sort of sustainable landscapes. And, when you look at climate finance, for example, in New Zealand, the price of carbon has gone up to $80 a ton of CO2 equivalent. That's about $50 a ton. That is, in some cases, higher than the stumpage value of the timber. And so it's driving substantial reforestation of rural grazing land. In the California market, the price is a bit lower, maybe $16 a ton, but that is also driving conservation of marginal forests and extending of rotation ages to build up carbon stocks. In Australia, the carbon price is about 35 Aussie dollars, so maybe 25, 27 US dollars a ton. That is now starting to drive reforestation. We've recently launched a new program where we partner with farmers and try to take the proportion of their farms that are not really economically productive and reforesting those areas and giving them some exposure to the carbon price upside through the lease rates that we can pay. And I think that's a much better model than just going out and buying farms and planting them up with trees. If we can actually partner with the farmers and show them how a transition to sustainable land use can actually be economically more productive for them, I think that's a more durable kind of social outcome. So we're also starting to see efforts to create value for biodiversity conservation. We manage extensive natural forests in Tasmania for conservation purposes. And a couple of years ago, we began developing natural capital accounting on those using the Natural Capital Protocol. And we were assessing their carbon storage value, their watershed value, and biodiversity value. And it's interesting that these natural attributes are viewed as contributing 3 times as much to society as the value from the timber plantations that are associated with those natural forests. And these natural capital accounts are being assessed by or audited by KPMG in the same way that they would audit our financial performance. There's a lot of pressure now coming on investors, on companies to zero out their impacts on climate change and their impacts on nature. And so as that expands, as that movement grows, there's going to be more value created in the forestry sector if we can position ourselves to be a solution provider in both nature conservation and climate. So, in summary, I would say, what's happening in the forestry sector is that the asset class is evolving into a kind of a natural infrastructure that's providing both climate and conservation benefits, as well as feedstock linked to the new circular bioeconomy industries and linked with positive benefits to rural communities. And that transition needs to be a win-win outcome for investors, for communities, and for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. You gave a very positive message to all of us, I think. In the part of the world I come from, it's not so positive, and the investments in forestry and the image of forestry is not so positive. We're talking very much, and not just in Europe, but in many parts of the world, including, I'm sure, in your part of the world, about ESG, so environment, social, and governance. And since you are operating in such different parts of the world, how do you address governance? Do you work with local governments? Do forest workers working with you, forest owners working with you, do they understand the role of forests in climate change? Is there a real connection between forest and forestry? Can you tell us a bit more about it? I would also like to talk about investments, but we'll come back to this after Derek. Please tell us a little bit about this.
Well, you have to put in place kind of a system of governance that can operate across, these different regions, both, countries like Australia and New Zealand that have, good infrastructure and plantation programs and so on, and then emerging markets where you have more challenging issues in terms of both environmental and community relationships. But we have been able to work with our clients in terms of the framework. So we use the forestry certification. In emerging markets, we're using the IFC performance standards. We have a framework of sustainability reporting that cuts across all of our assets. So with the service providers locally, we have to work with them effectively to help them understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish on behalf of our investor clients. And I think people are excited about that, and they can see how their work is contributing to broader societal benefits. And I think that's the way it has to be couched to people.
Well, thank you, David. We'll come back to you because you gave us some very positive inputs and positive signals. So thank you so much. May I turn now to Derek? Derek Nighbour? Derek?
I'm here.
Okay. Hello.
Hi, Teresa.
Hello. Last but not least, Derek is President and CEO of FPAC, the Forest Products Association of Canada, since 2016. And prior to that, you have been in a different world. You have served over 7 years as Senior Vice President with the Food and Consumer Products of Canada, which is an interesting background for us. Derek, can I ask you to address our friends, our audience?
Yeah, for sure. And I think my background in working with consumer goods companies like the Nestle's and Procter & Gamble's and Unilever's has really served me well in this role. Prior to that, I had some time working with the retail sector in Canada, the Home Depots, the Canadian Tires, some of the larger retailers operating here. So I feel in some ways my career has kind of come full circle as we deal with a number of these sustainability issues and some of the opportunities in terms of working with those partners in other sectors to create greener communities and respond to the evolving consumer demands. David talked about the industry having its moment, and I couldn't agree more. We're seeing it in Canada. I'm actually based in Ottawa, Canada, but today I'm in New York City because I have a couple of days of meetings here at the UN. With the UN Forum on Forests, and there's no doubt that I don't think forest management, forest products have ever figured so prominently in the global policy space. So I want to talk a little bit today about what we're seeing in Canada, and I'm going to take a bit of a step back. It's a privilege to share the stage with incredible global leaders, and I've had a lot of dialogue about what's happening, in terms of innovation and that growing bioeconomy. But in going to the next slide, I want to take a bit of a step back to maybe level set on the opportunity, and I want to recognize our friends at the National Council for Air and Stream Improvement at Nikasi, who've established this model in terms of the many spokes on the wheel, if you will, in terms of forestry solutions. I look at our partners in other sectors. I think of the steel industry. I think of the cement industry. They've got it kind of easy. They're the heaviest of polluters. They have to focus on their manufacturing processes. They have to focus on product innovation. We've got a lot more across the value chain in forestry, and it does start in the forest. And there was conversation, I think it was today, so talk about rejuvenating our forests. We really need to build resiliency and stay focused on forest health in a changing climate. I'll give you an example. Here in Canada, now 25 times the forested land base is affected by fire and pests every year over what we harvest. So 25 times more of the land base is impacted by pests and fire than what we sustainably harvest and what we replace. And we're seeing some parts of Canada have been so seriously scorched by fire that that regrowth is difficult. So we've got a big forest health and land-based carbon priority. Of course, how do we lock that carbon into long-lived wood products? Dr. Peter Holmgren in Sweden talks about moving that carbon pool from the forest into the city. How do we do that? Through long-lived products. We've got a number of opportunities to do more in that GHG emissions reduction space, optimizing recycling, and of course the substitution effect in avoided emissions. So I like to level set with this because this anchors us in the many opportunities before us and the many areas of focus as we have this discussion, the bioeconomy being just one part of this. Next slide, Tammy. I talked a bit about the fire issue. We're in a situation in Canada now where our national parks are carbon sources. So let that sink in for a minute. So our protected areas are now carbon sources, and Canada has evolved. We've spent the first few years here of the Trudeau government's mandate talking about emissions reduction, and our emissions reduction strategy has been launched. This year is all about adaptation. And forest management is going to figure prominently into that. So on the left of the screen here is one of our beautiful national parks, which was ravaged by a mountain pine beetle outbreak. And of course, those foresters on the line will know that when pests when pests attack, as they have in Jasper, that creates massive fire risks. And I will also say on the fire side that disproportionately when it comes to community evacuations, it's Indigenous communities who are forced to evacuate because of the fires in our northern and more rural parts of Canada. On the right is a photo taken from our partners at Ducks Unlimited Canada that shows some wetland preservation and a thoughtfully and sustainably managed forest footprint. So I'm really seeing an opportunity in this adaptation conversation to raise, to raise the profile of forestry. We have a huge opportunity to build that resiliency, advance forest health, rejuvenate our forests. Next slide, Tammy, please. So just in the adaptation space, a number of things we're looking at, and these are important, not only for forest health, they're important for jobs, they're important to fireproof and keep communities safe, they're important to secure and protect critical infrastructure. So it moves around fireproofing neighborhoods and communities. How do we adjust forest harvest schedules to minimize insect outbreaks? Tammy, next slide again, please. Reducing damage in our forests from windstorms, planting for drought tolerance, and how do we find markets for that low grade wood? What is that opportunity? And that's a big conversation in Canada as well. So I wanted to give the adaptation piece some profile today. I think it's really, really important to the broader conversation. Tammy, next slide. As we think about where government, I'm not going to go through this slide, but I did want to just share from a Canadian perspective, all of the different federal government tools, initiatives, standards that we're seeing before us. And this is a huge challenge for industry and industry associations in terms of our ability to keep up with all this change. So I share this to demonstrate maybe in a way how overwhelming some of the policy framework dialogues are, and the pressure on us, not only in companies, but also industry associations, to keep up with all of these different initiatives that our governments are bringing at us, so we don't miss opportunities for our sector. So I just share that to maybe make a case for the complexity that we're feeling or facing, and a number of the activist and very busy moves by governments in places like Canada. Next slide, Tammy, please. So I like this slide, and I'd said to today, so I included a few more slides here because I'm happy to share them. But I did, when we talk with government officials in Canada, often more urban parliamentarians who don't understand our sector very well, they might not understand our products or the opportunity very well. This is a great slide that shows in the bioeconomy just a number of the levers that can be pulled and a number of the opportunities to drive not only good outcomes for the climate and for our carbon story, but also to drive green jobs and really accelerate and create those job opportunities for working families. Next slide, Tammy, please. So I wanted to share. A lot of people know, our tall wood agenda in Canada is quite well known. But I wanted to share, as we think about the bioeconomy, I know sometimes I find in Canada there is a skew to biofuels, and biofuels are very important, but they're just one example of what's possible. So I wanted to share with you just 3 examples from member companies in the FPAC family that are some interesting things that they're doing. And this one is one of my favorites. This who would have thought a forestry company is going to be integral to growing 50 million cucumbers a year? But that's what we're seeing with Resolute Forest Products and the Tundra greenhouse in Saint-Félicien, Quebec. So we're the mill, the pulp mill, provides 25% of the heat using heat waste to power the greenhouse. The hot water supply gets used for heating. Processed waters get used for crop production, and this all started with a conversation at the community level about what might be possible here. So 175 million invested to date, 180 good-paying jobs in a community of 10,000 people. Great. Just a tremendously innovative and interesting initiative that we're seeing in the Saguenay region of Quebec. Next slide, Tammy, please. And I'll go to the next slide again. So Hinton, Alberta, a town of about 10,000 people. This is Canada's first commercial scale lignin plant, 30 tons of lignin being produced a day. and with the focus here, of course, in terms of substituting those fossil fuel intensive materials like adhesives and resins. Also some great integrated work being done here in terms of plywood production and adapting those resins to be used in plywood. So some tremendous innovation. I have a bit of a bias. I grew up in a small rural forestry community in Eastern Ontario, I'm just amazed, and I've seen firsthand how important these innovations are to smaller communities. Again, Hinton in Alberta, about a community of about 10,000 people. This is an important mill to that community, and this innovation, leading innovation, doing some amazing things in Alberta. And the final example I wanted to share is a natural gas replacement strategy that Mercer is undertaking in the interior British Columbia. This is a kraft pulp mill. And this is all about using biogenic fuels from the pulping process to replace natural gas. At full throttle here, as this innovation advances, the hope is to be able to save the equivalent amount of heat that would heat 20,000 homes in the area. So, seeing a lot more work around, district heating programs, and I share this because of the breadth of the opportunity. I think in the bioeconomy, I think sharing these different examples of about the different ideas that are out there, the different innovations that are happening, are really important to demonstrating that, we're not a one-trick pony in forestry. I think there's a lot of opportunity before us, and a lot of great innovation happening that can be scaled up. So I think the next slide is my thank you. And I want to thank again the team for having me today. It's a real privilege, and greetings to everyone from around the world. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you very much. You talked about the bioeconomy in one of your last slides, and you also talked about how difficult and complex is current regulation. But what should be the role of, if any, of course, of regulation to accelerate this transition to bioeconomy, to renewables, etc.?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. The first thing I'd say is I think one of the issues we're facing in Canada is the move to get greater bang for buck, to try to find that 1 or 2 megatons at a time. And I think one of the challenges we're facing in the broader emissions reduction plan in Canada is that it's tough for forestry to get a piece of the action there. That means the heaviest polluters go to the front of the line in terms of the steel refineries and the cement facilities. So I think the number one thing, I think, to make this more inclusive, I think there need to be different solutions for different sectors. We have not seen a sectoral approach to emissions reduction in Canada, and I think that would be welcome, because I think the focus and a lot of the investment dollars on the table are more skewed towards the massive projects where you can get the 1 or 2 megatons at a time, and that's not going to happen in forestry. For a lot of our mills, it might be 150,000 tons, a couple 100,000 tons. Stackable, it's significant, but that would be one of the pieces. The other one I would say is I'd like to see more incentives beyond biofuels. There's been a real focus on biofuels in Canada, and that's great. But what about bioadhesives? What about tall wood? What about some of the other opportunities before us, so that we can seize the broader opportunity? That would be my other comment. Okay.
Thank you very much. Would you like to all come together now, please? Thank you. And I think I will go back to Ilkka, because he has been very quiet. He started, and now I think it's your turn to tell us a bit more. And what I wanted to ask you is about the substitution. Yes. We all know, not all of us, but that carbons, and I think it was your word, carbon storing products that you are developing, and of course they are meant also to replace fossil-based fuels. But are consumers ready for it? I mean, how is the uptake? Do they understand that our products, so nature-based products, can they understand that this is a real solution to climate change? how can you inform them? How can you make them uptake those products?
We think about our products storing carbon, so I think that's easier to understand because you see the physical products like solid wood products and.
Can you? Yeah.
Sorry.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, it's easier to understand the carbon storing than the substitution, because when you are building like solid wood products, so it's easy to understand, so that this product is storing carbon, but still when you are discussing with environmentalists and some European Union politicians and so forth, so it's also a question, so whether this carbon storage here is something that we should be doing, or should we have the carbon storage in the forest. But I think that this example from our Canadian colleagues showed very well, so that the wood standing in forest is not very good carbon storage, because there are these fires and there are these storms and there are these insects. But then when we come to the substitution, so meaning so that when fossil materials are used and fossil materials are used as a products or as an energy, and then you have these renewable materials, renewable energy, so how much can you substitute there? So that's, let's say, more immaterial. And I think that also in the legislation and this legislation which is prepared presently in European Union, the substitution effect is not recognized well enough. So there we have a lot of to do and to really, let's say, try to make it more concrete. Like, for example, these textile fibers, which are in the end of the day replacing these oil-based polyester type fibers. So the substitution effect is the biggest one. And I think that we have to be more, let's say, closer to the end consumer in our communication, and not speak to the general public with too scientific terms.
Yeah.
If you allow me to just to add on Jukka, my perception is that it's very difficult to convince 8 billion people that we need to change the consumer habits in the world. It's very difficult to change only with environmental speech or position, and I think it's critical that we change the world. I would welcome the direct position to have a sectoral approach. That we need to have a cap and trade system all over the world, and in our as we are on the right side of the equation, we can be part of the solution. But it's very clear the lawmakers need to do something, need to establish what would be on the sectoral approach, the cap for every single sector, and how we are going to monetize carbon. That was David was bringing us to the table. And how we are going to monetize investments for the future. I think we cannot depend on the consumers, on my personal opinion.
No, do you think that is feasible to have an overall approach from the sector and to reach, as David was saying, more regulated markets?
My perception is this is a problem of 8 billion people. We cannot be procrastinating the solution. We are or win-win or lose-lose process. And if we do not have one approach that limit the emissions in one side and increasing the carbon sequestration the other side through rejuvenating or regeneration of natural forests, we are not going to be part of the solution. And I welcome other Derek and other people to join IBA and the other associations in the world, Cepi and other associations, to work together to have a sectoral approach. I think it would be very positive, and we are going to be the leading industry in the world if we do it.
Yeah, but we have to reach somehow a right balance between the roles of the forest as a sink and as storage.
I think that in Europe, so the European Union policies and the Fit for 55 package, legislation package has made our life a bit more complicated than in some parts of the land. So basically basically we know so that how we should be the solution and what we should be doing, but we must also get the leading politicians to let's say support our sector and the way we are developing, and to get the politicians to support us, we need also the general public to be on that mind so that they want this kind of economy to develop, because general public votes politicians, and politicians are then directing the government officials. So basically that's why it's important to get the message through also to general public. I don't need 8 billion people, 800 million is enough for me.
Yeah, I agree. But, you know, we don't need 8 billion people, but why, for example, in COP27, this was not recognized? Substitution carbon storing products, why is it not taken into account? It was previously in I think it was the 4th IPCC report in 2007 or 2008, was very clear recognized that, you know, managing forests in a sustainable way and using the yield for products and for even for energy, they were saying, was the best way to mitigate climate change. Why is it lost? Why aren't we there? I think this.
I think that the question is the land use and the biodiversity and the nature loss. This is coming out in different parts, and basically why this is not recognized is because the biodiversity issues, of course, have to be handled also, and we must be able to solve the both things on the same agenda that comes for the forestry and that comes for the agriculture and so forth.
And the problem, Teresa, is that we have these unpriced negative externalities, if you will. Somebody can pollute and doesn't have to pay for it. We have positive externalities, and that, you know, we conserve and store carbon in both in the forest and in the wood products, and we're not paid for it. So if you don't drive a price signal through the economy, it's very difficult to get that systemic change and to have the right industrial structure, if you will, to, you know, reach a decarbonization outcome.
So you think it should be rather companies doing that, or they should do more to reach this this level, or is it more you know, a matter again of the world regulation? How can you drive? How can we drive? Not 8 billion people, Walter, but how can us as an industry, as a sector, how can we drive this acceptance? And from one hand, and from the other hand, this investments, if you will, to achieve a real result, and you know, to be in both parts of the equation, as Walter was saying, to really be there. How can we get there?
Well, one thing we can do as an industry is to get a standardized carbon accounting protocol for both forests and wood products. You know, we have to report to our clients now in terms of our carbon balance, and that includes both the forest and the wood products. And if everyone had a consistent approach to that type of carbon accounting, then very quickly you would start to have much more transparency about the positive role that the forestry sector is playing. So there has been work through this carbon accounting protocol that's been done by the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, working with the World Resources Institute. And we're just starting to road test that, I think, in the next 2 or 3 months. But that, I think, is really important for showing clearly what the sector is achieving.
Mm-hmm. Any comments to David?
I will welcome David's position about to have the single system of measuring emissions and sequestration. I think would be very important to all of us. In addition to that, I welcome Ilkka position to have one more collaborative and networking relation among the industry. I think we are not here on the competition. We are here on collaboration process, because since we are part of the solution, We need to work together on this dimension. But it's very important that we set a global regulated carbon market and very quickly on this. And if you have this established in every single part of the world, and we can have a cap system, would allow to have a trade system that force the carbon the investment in the world.
Yeah, a common carbon accounting for the forest sector, actually, because this is where it has to be based. Derek, I think you might have something to say in this. You know, as the CEO and president of a association, Forest Products, when you see those important CEOs asking for common approaches to reach a common positions, because this is what it is, right? To reach common regulators, to reach common understandings about the sector. There's a need for some sort of common position as well. And the dissemination, how do you see that?
Well, so we have through the International Council of Forest and Paper Associations, with which Jori Ringman of Cepi now is the president of, effective I think July the 1st. You know, through that network, we have 28 countries around the world. We meet regularly to compare notes and set priorities. There has been a lot of discussion in this area of late. You know, we're even through that network even just sharing what our different governments doing. I mean, like we're as I shared with that one slide, we've been really challenged in Canada to keep up. The pace at which federal regulation has been coming at us has been swift. And so swift in a federation like Canada, where, and remember, we're a bit of an anomaly in Canada given the public land base that we have. So 90% of the lands that my members operate on are under the purview of provincial governments. You know, private woodlot owners are a very small part. They're about 10% of the market here in Canada, or the land base here in Canada. So we've had even issues that the federal agenda is moving so fast, the provinces can't keep up. So you know, so I think there are going to be differences from market to market. You know, I'd like to hear more from David around the work that WBCSD and WRI are doing. I think that's really fascinating. I understand the previous global forest carbon accounting discussions through IPCC are not easy either. You get some countries that might have bigger fire, you know, places like Canada where we've got a lot more fire happening, and I'd be interested in understanding a bit more. Maybe how does that work interface with the required IPCC approvals or process that might need to follow? I guess anyway, long way of saying lots of different things happening in different countries, but that conversation is happening to try to find that common ground.
David, would you like to come in with the WBCSD?
I didn't mean to put you on the spot as a fellow Canadian, David, but
no. The thing was that they had the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 accounting protocols and so on, but it had no protocol for removals. So they're trying to address that by bringing in a removals protocol that becomes part of that framework, and that allows us then to really properly account for the benefits of our industry.
Right.
I have a lot of respect, and I have to, because I was part of that. The associations and global platforms talking about sharing, discussions, etc. But what about coming to, concrete positions, concrete principles, concrete proposals? That's a problem. Normally, it's the members that don't want, or companies, or in Derek's case, it's the local governments. I mean, we will never get out of this.
Yeah, well, I'd push back on that. And, we've got 7 or 8 different policy statements. We've looked at the carbon neutrality of biomass, for example. So, we're not just getting together, talking and doing nothing. I do think there are some substantive pieces of work that have come out of this. But the bigger carbon accounting piece it's massive. It's just massive. And I have a day job to serve my members' interests with the government of Canada, dealing with the regulatory environment. So I think there are some good foundational pieces. I think there's a lot of I'm telling you, the relationships globally across our global associations have never been tighter. there's a lot of incredible collaboration and trust right across the ICFPA network, and I know as I do the handoff, I had been president the last 3 years, and Jori will be taking over, but there are a number of pieces in the carbon space that we're going to be doing more work on.
Okay, good.
My perception is it's a two-piece solution here. First, we need to have the lawmakers to address the carbon regulated market and the voluntary market as well on a bilateral discussion. I think carbon markets are critical in one side. The other side, I think that we need to have a call to action in our sectorial approach in order to address, since we have the lowest biomass cost in the world, we are talking about comparing with many other biomass, we are much more competitive than the other ones. We need to increase our market share in this industry of bioeconomy for the future and replace other materials as well. We are on a position that we working together, we can address part of the solution.
Yeah, and you just talked about bioeconomy. So what is, how should I say? How can, I think I said this before, but individually, because this is our all pieces to get together. What are the barriers and what are the solutions to, if you want, or to really come about with a bioeconomy in your countries? Now we are talking, we're not trying to reach 9 million or 8 billion people, but what are the solutions for the bioeconomy in your own setups? Because all of you are in the bioeconomy and you are developing new products and a lot of carbon storing products in textiles, in new materials, really benefiting and really utilizing all parts of the trees. So what's the way forward in the bioeconomy? I like bioeconomy because it also includes economy. And, we need that. And maybe we can convince more people if we talk about financial benefits, economic benefits, as David was talking about. What is the way forward?
Today, so maybe I'll start with. I think one of the things is it's not all about us, right? I think where we're seeing huge opportunity in terms of sharing the message and the economic and the environmental opportunities is the partners who stand to benefit. That's our unions in Canada. That's our Indigenous communities in Canada who now directly control 10% of Canada's wood supply and are increasingly involved in co-management arrangements and joint ventures with our companies. It's local mayors and councillors whose communities stand to benefit, and they can bolster their tax base at a time when affordability challenges are a concern. And I know a lot of municipal and local governments are concerned about paying the bills coming out of the pandemic. Our local chambers of commerce who see the spin-off jobs and the opportunities in their communities. So I think there's a whole ecosystem of partners and beneficiaries here, and it takes time to build those relationships and have those dialogues, and it can't be a one and done. We're pretty deliberate about that in Canada. I know it, and that's not just Canada, that's happening in other parts, but I do find, when I can go in with our United Steelworkers Union and a couple of Indigenous owned businesses and a mayor of a community and a couple presidents of chambers of commerce, then it's a community initiative, right? So I think that's one of the how do we build that coalition of support to move this forward and have those other champions on our side?
Yeah, it's a call for action. But the problem is we cannot wait so much, as Walter was saying, and rightly so. So there is here a lot of different issues, and one of them that we did not talk about, but I raised was, the balance between sinks and storage, and then carbon markets, because what David's company is doing, part of it, is investing in carbon offset sales to compliance market or even to voluntary markets, right? But at the same, so you're also committed, David, to deliver financial value to forest owners, and by supplying offsets to business that have to comply in different parts of the world. But doesn't it imply, in a way, theoretical way at least, that this risks leaving forests still, which is what a lot of, at least in Europe, and I suppose in Canada you have the same problem, regulators are asking for?
Yeah, no, and I think that comes down to the design of these carbon price signals, because the problem from what I can see is every jurisdiction just writes their own rules, and they're not fungible. And so California, they said, oh, you know, we've had really tough regulations on forestry operations, so we'll give everyone who conserved their forest gets carbon credits. And in New Zealand, it's more like they had a problem with people converting forests into dairy farms, so they made a price on deforesting forests, and then a carbon price for replanting areas. And you start to get these confusing schemes that are all, you know, set up by their own kind of local political imperatives or whatever, rather than purely a, you know, stock change accounting like the IPCC. But that being said, when you have a sizable price signal, like in New Zealand, where the price is probably as high for forest carbon as anywhere in the world, $50 a ton, you see radical changes in the underlying economics of land use, and forestry becomes a much broader part of the landscape than it would be in the absence of a price signal. So it does do the job, if you will, of pushing you towards more, you know, low carbon economic activities.
Mm-hmm. But you need those forests as well. You need the wood, you need the trees.
Yeah, and that's right. And that's sort of, then it flows into the fact that if we also want to have a bioeconomy transition, we need more feedstock. Yeah. So if we can yoke those two together, you know, we kill two birds with one stone, if you will.
Yeah. Ilkka, do you want to say something?
Yes, if we think about the Finnish situation and maybe also the other Nordic countries, so I think that for us, it's a question of balancing the different needs of the forest, or what kind of expectations are directed to forest. So we must have the economical use, we must have the climate benefits, and we must have the biodiversity issue balanced. And it means so that we must get this kind of a let's say mutual development program with different stakeholders who are looking to forestry from different angles. So basically to develop the ways how we are doing forestry, and to get the acceptance that this is also protecting the biodiversity and it's beneficial to climate. Because now there is a very heavy discussion so that we should be reducing the use of our forest land. Like I said earlier in my presentation, so I don't see very big challenge in global demand of these bioeconomy products. So that's there, and there is a high demand for these products. But for us, it's the raw material base. We do not have this kind of a, let's say, land resources reserves that maybe there are in some parts of the world, like in Southern America. But we are there in a very limited, highly used land area.
Yeah. So you see very different situations.
Yes.
In every part of the world, and this is why it's and I understand very well, Derek. It's so difficult to bring all those things together in something common and positive, and that really contributes to solutions. At this point, I would like to turn to Mark Rushton, who is in the studio and who has been collecting questions for you. Mark, from the chat box. Mark?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me? I am here. I've got to say, it was a fantastic discussion and presentation. So a lot of the questions were actually answered, especially in that last session there, which was hugely interesting. In fact, Jukka and I already know somebody who's getting paid more to keep his forest standing than he is to have it harvested. So it's going to be a massive conversation piece going forward, I'm sure. Jukka, any comments to make on that?
Yeah, indeed, that was very interesting to hear that, okay, what was said by David, that, okay, what's the value of the carbon credit, that we are in New Zealand talking about the $50 per ton, $50 per ton. And in all, if you have a look at, okay, what's the value of the, okay, voluntary carbon market, they are saying that, okay, it's today about $1 billion. Okay, is it a lot? Maybe not today. But okay, it will come in, okay, more sort of big issue that, okay, there are projections saying that, okay, by 2030, that is not that far away. Like, okay, McKinsey is saying that it will be $50 billion. Or you are hearing like a Bloomberg, it's 200 billion. So I don't know, okay, how do you see that? Okay, maybe that can be a question to all of you. So, okay, do you see that as any sort of attribute to making the bioproducts, or does that affect to your thinking?
Jukka, I also would like to ask the audience if but you can answer that question as well. It's very, very relevant. Yep.
Yeah. So
David, Walter, who would like to answer that question that we start touching upon? So, you know, carbon credits to offset responsibilities or you know, targets for regulation targets, and that depriving, again, I say theoretically, depriving the industry from raw material. That was.
Can start on that, David, if you allow me. I think we are in a transition period. Long term, the carbon price was going to be zero. But right now, we are going to have a very high carbon price. If you do not do it, we are not going to have incentives to a major CapEx program that we are doing all over the world. We are seeing that Ilkka was mentioning that Metsä is investing almost $3 billion right now on new investments. Suzano is doing the same. Right now, we are in a multi-billion-dollar project in order to invest, to increase raw material to the world. We believe that if we have a right carbon price, many of the investments will make feasible to be done, and then we are going to increase the CapEx program. If we do not have this, and this is the reason that a voluntary market and or a regulated market will be critical for the world in the near future.
Yeah. Very good. Anybody will want to come in?
I think there's definitely a push now to get the carbon accounting on wood used in building materials and other long-lived uses to get that set up so that there can be, you know, a carbon protocol associated with that. And I know in Australia they're proposing to do just that, to have a, you know, a life of use protocol where if you build a mass timber building and it's going to stay there for 100 years, well, then you can get credit for the carbon stored in those buildings.
Good idea.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's a massive potential regulation from the European Union to address buildings to lower their carbon emissions, both by renewing them and new ones. Very tough targets as well, as usual. Mark, do you have any questions from the audience? Okay.
So we have a few here. There's to start off with for Ilkka, there's quite an interesting question about using no fossil fuels, and that is how do you harvest without using fossil fuels? Maybe a tricky question.
Oh, it's not tricky. We are not harvesting with our fossil fuels. When we are getting rid of fossil fuels, we are getting rid of our fossil fuels in our industrial operation. The harvesting operation and logistic operations are a challenge, which at the company level, it's not possible to be solved. In Finland, we have a target that by, was it now 2030, so for this machinery used in harvesting, so there should be a 10% blending mandate for renewable diesel fuel for the harvesting machines. So basically we are far away from being non-fossil there. So, but then when we are looking our total value chain, so when we are calculating, so how much we are storing in our operations carbon into our products, or how much we are doing the substitution effect, and then of course calculating the logistic emissions as our emissions. So basically we have a target to that, so that how should we have the pluses and minuses going into the right direction. But for sure it's going to take a very long time before we can get rid of fossil fuels in logistic chain.
Sure. I was actually interviewing one of your guys at Pulp Paper, and they were telling me about Kemi, and you have a new electric crane there, which is really quite something else.
Yeah, everything on the logistics chain that we can do with electric motors is done with electric motors. For example, like in Kemi, so we have about 80% of the wood is coming by train, and the trains are electric operated trains. So that's one thing, and everything what is happening inside the mill area. So if it's possible, so it's electrically operated. So of course it's a small if you think about delivering goods from Nordic countries all over the world, but still we have to take every place where we can do and take the fossils away.
Excellent, thank you. A couple of questions for Walter. So dear Walter, thank you for an excellent presentation. Carbon footprint, 800,000 trees planted every day. How many are used in the production process, and how many approximately natural species are planted to add to the 1 million hectares already in place?
Yeah, we are increasing our planted area, and this is the reason that we are planting much more right now. We are planting 800,000 trees, meaning 285,000 hectares this year of planted area. It's very the highest by far planted system in the world right now. But we are harvesting right now less than 500,000 trees a day. To use in our operation, expanding our biomass right now. In terms of natural species that we have on our in the forest, because we do not confuse planted trees with forest. Forest is something that we are keeping, we are preserving. We have 1 million hectares of this. I don't know the number of species that we have over there, but the beauty is that what doing right now is that we have fragmented areas that we have corridors now that we are connecting in 500,000 hectares at this point of time.
Okay, excellent. And another one from you here from Ludo Deals, who's one of our advisory board members. He said, dear Walter, if you would replace plastics by wood-based materials, will it also be possible to recycle these wood-based materials?
Yeah, I think our products are recyclable, our products are renewable, and that's very positive for the nature. And I think as I have been reinforcing our position, our industry is in a very good part of the solution to this issue. What we need to do is, and I would like to reinforce my position, is a more collaborative approach. We have several initiatives on different associations or different companies in the world. Lignin is one of them, biofuels is the other, textile is other, and we have been working on a very fragmented R&D process. My perception would be very good if we have a more joint or more collaboration among industries and associations, companies and associations.
Sure. And Walter, again, you've been very popular on this panel, I think, because we've got a lot of Brazilian people who are attending. So there's another question here, 62.4%, or about 522 million hectares of Brazil is forested. Walter, do you think that entrepreneurs in Brazil can use this environment to produce more bio options to the world?
Bio options, yes. But not to harvest this natural forest. my position is that we need to keep the natural forest 100% preserved, and we have to combat illegal deforestation immediately. Amazon and Cerrado, there is a two major biomes that we have, must to be preserved right now. And this is critical for Brazil. And I have been advocating this position. My views is that the world needs to understand that would be very positive to address the social problems that we have on these areas, and we keep preserving these areas completely natural.
Okay. This is quite a complicated question. I'm not quite sure I understand it myself, but I'm going to put it to you because I think it's an interesting one. You really only think about carbon fixation, so there's a carbon fixation. Why does nobody speak about evapotranspiration and water cycle as boosted by trees? Does anybody want to respond to that one?
No, I think those are the three big issues: is fresh water, biodiversity, and carbon, and they all are central to how we manage forests. And we've been doing this natural capital accounting, and the provision of fresh water, regulation of fresh water by forests is one of the most important values, particularly in a continent like Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, I might add, the multiple values management is a huge challenge, right? Like you're not always going to be able to do the modeling and have every variable win. We see that within forest management plans in Canada, even managing for different species of mammals, birds and fish. Like what moose want, caribou want the exact opposite. Grizzly bears want something different than caribou want. And in some parts, you're working with the best data and science and local input, and you might even have an indigenous community that wants to maximize moose populations for hunting versus at the expense of caribou. And I find we get into these kind of academic or scientific arguments versus emotion on some of these issues, because they are important issues. I don't want to dismiss them, but this sense that we're going to check the box on absolutely every variable in a dynamic environment is lunacy. But yet we get drawn into those issues, and that's a conundrum, right? The reason we're focusing on carbon, there's significant consumer and government shifts happening that have brought us there, and we don't want to miss that opportunity. But and I'm finding this especially in that I think it was Walter talked a bit about conservation earlier. That's inherent to how we do forestry around the world, and it's not an either or. I know IBA in Brazil did a tremendous report that Jose Carlos shared with me on biodiversity and some of the great work that's happening in Brazil. We're doing a similar report in Canada, but a starting point in Canada, 50% of Canada's forests aren't even managed. Half of our forests in Canada are unmanaged. There's no forestry activity happening in half of Canada's forests. The remaining 50%. Today, half of that is under some kind of a conservation measure. So there's a lot of great stuff going on there. I hate always saying we have a communications problem, but sometimes we do in this space because we often get into these academic versus more emotional agreements, and then we're having an engagement at that kind of level.
Any other comments there, Ilkka?
Well, so that the conditions in different parts of the world, different countries are very, very different, and you must be very specific when you are deciding what to do with the forest and how to act there, so that there is not one set of tools which fits everyone. Yeah.
Well, climate change it's a global phenomenon, that is entrenched also in forest resources, and it's dependent on local contexts, driven by people in most, Derek just told us, right? In many regions of the world, heavily regulated in other regions under political and institutional frameworks, and is perceived differently from different stakeholders. And so this is all the difficulty. I'm sure that in a number of your countries, forest is, can, as David was saying, they can be working with forests and they can be very well received and people can find a purpose on it. And in many other parts of the world, they have to be left untouched, right? It's a perception, right, Ilkka? You know that.
Yes, yes.
So it's, I totally agree with you, Walter, that, you should all get together, but it's very difficult. Yeah, because of all this variety, all this diversity of situations, of contexts. Yeah. Okay.
Great. That was it for the questions.
Okay.
There was a great presentations.
Yeah. Okay. We just have a few more minutes. So at this point, I would like to ask each one of you to add. We talked about so many things, opportunities, we call for actions. We need forests, both for sink, storage, and substitutions. And then there is this dissonance between not accepting this. We've talked a little bit about biodiversity. We talked about communication, not enough in my view, but it's always a major subject. I would like to ask you if you could, each one of you, if you could quickly summarize what we talked about, which was very, very diverse. For me, I think it's very important to talk about substitution and to take it up to, high levels, like next COP, for example. It's very important. It has not got attention lately. So, just a few words of what we could do in communicating our story, in communicating the benefits to climate change and also to people of what we're doing.
I'm happy to start. I think one of the areas, I think heading into COP in November, our associations around the world are seized with the opportunity before us. I think there's going to be a significant climate finance tenor to COP this year. I think there was some disappointment with the narrow focus. The deforestation agenda is an important one, and it's a serious, it's a real challenge in some parts of the world more than others. But I think once again, there's a negative angle on that piece that overlooks all the benefits. So I'm hopeful that through that climate finance lens and substitution and some of these other pieces, we might be able to see a better narrative out of COP this year. In terms of communicating, how can we relate, especially to more urban audiences? And I think a couple of areas we're seeing that is in Canada anyway, and in the US, I would say a renaissance in the urban forestry space. People are now starting to see pests infecting or impacting their forests in their cities, which is a relatable point in terms of the importance of tending to and managing those forests. And also the tall wood agenda. We're seeing in a lot of our urban centers in Canada and the United States, that's a relatability. I have some very left-wing politicians that really want to talk about the tall wood that they're seeing in their community and how excited they are about that. So I think in terms of those communications, I think we're an industry that does a good job talking to ourselves. I do think we need to find those creative ways to connect more with some of those urban, suburban audiences, millennial audiences through some more creative outreach. But I think that urban connection through urban forestry and tall wood can be a powerful one for us.
Thanks, Derek. That's interesting. Cities. Walter, would you like to come in?
Guys, we have to understand that we have probably 400 or 500 million people discussing climate change, and the rest of 7.5 billion people are not thinking about that on a Maslow pyramid. They are thinking about their basic things that need to be addressed. If we do not have the lawmakers around the world, if we do not have the companies in the world joining this process, we are going always to have nice speeches, but never going to call for action and a solution. We need to have advocating ourselves together. We need to do it immediately. We cannot postpone, procrastinate the situation. I would like to thank you very much for Jukka and Mark for inviting. I would like to thank you, Teresa, for always leading on a very interesting discussion. Thank you, Teresa, for doing that. And I think we need to work together in order to make this come true. It's a possibility, it's an opportunity that we have. We have to improve the communications, but we need to make the things happen.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Walter. David?
Well, I guess I would just close by maybe saying that if I think out to the back end of this century, because forestry is a multi-decadal industry, and you have a peak of 10 billion people are talking about a gross world product of $300 trillion. What does that look like on this planet? And sustainability is going to become central to everything. And we're in the sweet spot that we can provide those solutions. And I think the biggest challenge for us is to organize the scale of capital that's needed to grow our industry to meet those opportunities.
Definitely investing. Ilkka, the last word.
Yeah, I think that to be able to succeed in this being a solution, so we must get this idea through the people, so that we are not doing things because of the benefit of the companies, but we are doing it for the need of the people in different societies and the need of different societies. Because in the end of the day, we are producing goods for everyday life for people, and we should be true in our seek to find the sustainable ways to commerce with that.
Thank you to all of you. I think we just scratched the surface. We didn't talk about the risk of climate change being, this fight being left behind with everything that is happening, and things will not happen overnight. But if the words from you today could reach more regulators and more people, I think we already would have made, you would have made a difference. Thank you so much for a very interesting, too quick and too diverse. We didn't have time, of course, to focus on everything. Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon, a nice summer, a nice evening for you, all of you. And I will now ask Jukka to come in.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and thanks to Walter, thanks to Ilkka, thanks to David, thanks to Derek about these marvelous presentations, and thanks also for our partners who make this all happen. So thanks to Cepi, thanks to FPAC, thanks to IPA, and thanks to PAMSA. And I think that that is also reflecting also what Walter was saying, that we need to join our forces. So I think that that's one of the takeaways to get our message across. And on the other hand, I like very much what Ilkka said, that we need to make even down to consumers to be more aware about the solutions what this sector can provide. So we are also keep on repeating this bioproduct around us. We have the campaign with this up and running in the social media, where we are asking also the ordinary people to share in their story. What does it mean? What's their favorite bioproduct? What's the organization favorite bioproduct? Because this is also affecting the people's thinking, that what do they use, what type of, let's say, everyday choices they will then face in their own life. So that is a sort of learning process to, I would say, the entire society. I like also very much about this idea, what was said by the Derek, that this sectoral approach, that how do they define this, that how this the bioeconomy related to the climate change mitigation should be then handled. So I like that very much, and I know that you are working on it, and not alone in Canada. You do that together with Australians. You do that together with FAO. So like this let's say, remembering this discussion with this advisory council of the sustainable forest industries. And I think this year in particular, it is high on agenda. And I know that you are working on to get the message across to the COP27, which is really then the right place where these kind of discussions should take place, because there are no pan-global sort of organization for time being for these topics. But still, the climate change mitigation is affecting, not necessarily for the products, but it's affecting at least for the feedstock, what is then used. So it is the multiple role of the forests. And I also like very much that what was said by David, that and sort of, let's say, navigating us that what's then status of the let's say carbon credit market. So incredible prices already what you can find in New Zealand, and also what was said by David that that these are not sort of uniform, they are not regulated. It's a sort of wild west. Even here in Finland, there are tens of these kind of, let's say, programs taking place which are not comparable, without talking about the global level. So it really requires some sort of norm or regulation, at least in the long run, to get best out of it. So now we are running out of the time. So really, indeed, thank you to all speakers and the moderator, and thanks for the active audience. So we stop here, and hopefully we will see next time in the World BioEconomy Forum, 7th to 9th September in Ruka. So with these words, have a nice summer in the Northern Hemisphere and a nice winter time in the Southern Hemisphere. So goodbye and stay healthy.